Any, I guess to start things off, um, like if you could like tell people like how did you kind of get into music gaming? Did you went and search for that, or did the music and gaming kind of intersection gotten hold of you? Like, what's the story of how you got into that intersection of music and gaming?
Yeah, it's a big question, really big question. And mine's more been music side to start off with. So when I was younger, I used to play a lot of instruments and stuff at the same time in tandem with sort of playing video games. But given the common tropes that I think our generation faced with gaming in like the early noughties, late 90s, throughout, there was always this trope about how the fact that, it wasn't, um, maybe it wasn't as much of a healthy protocol as perhaps playing instruments or something more sort of creative that's away from the screen or other such really typical tropes. But as I was going through music, I wanted to study it in the industry sense because I'd done a lot of volunteering. Like I worked with Jeff Swan down at his studio when he was based in Salisbury, just doing some bits for him. And now he does production work for um, like Mabel, Coldplay, Ed Sheeran. Like he's killing it, absolutely killing it. I'm not
Oh,
saying that I'm in any.
all the small names basically.
Yeah, I know he's absolutely killer from our tiny little hometown of Salisbury as well. It's amazing to see. I'm not saying I was in any shade as good, anywhere near. I was just a little ninja, just doing my thing. And he's gone on to do that, and then that was some of the experience work that I had, and I was volunteering a lot around getting an NCFE music technology level 1, some basics, and playing a lot in like local groups. Then I went to university to study it, the business side of things. And then afterwards, I went and joined Name Recordings, Name Label, and I was there for 2 years. And we worked at campaigns with like Neil Cali Trio and Get the Blessing, and worked with Esker in particular. That was Mercury nominated when I was there, which is great. And then worked at Sony. So a lot of my experience has actually been in the music industry side of things, as well as being a performer and engaging on the side. And gaming hadn't really been an avenue that I ever really wanted to pursue because I didn't really understand it from a clinical sense like I did with the music side of things, with the music industry side, because I hadn't really been saturated inside that market. But I always had an eye on when new stuff was coming out. I understood at the time the impact of some of the really important things that came out in the noughties. We're talking like the SSX, we're talking about the Tony Hawks, the Need for Speeds, We're
Yeah,
basically
did you remember one of the recent episodes from Matt's gaming music podcast where they paid tribute to the Tony Hawk?
Oh yeah, man.
Okay, yeah, I thought I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it. Yeah.
that was great. I mean, I totally agree with the narrative that they were running with there, which is that it was shaping culture. And I think that one of the substacks that I spoke about before was how culture was packaged inside of these gaming products, and no one really had access to those unless you played the game. While music was spread to all the traditional mediums and it was accepted in a much more palatable fashion. So you saw this on the radio, you saw it intertwined with films, and you saw it associated with celebrities and such. But then with the gaming side of things, it was always kind of frowned upon because I just don't think that people really understood it, or it maybe had some negative connotations at the time, despite I don't think the popular culture recognized how impactful some of these containers were.
Connotations. I lived through that period, but
Mm.
yeah, I didn't realize that there would have been some negative connotations around it.
Maybe it's just like my upbringing, but for example, there was a lot of friends of mine that would, or maybe the way that we were brought up, that was all the same, which is like you can study, you can play instruments, you can go out, you want sort of children to go play outside, but then there was a limited amount of screen time, like for all of the people that I knew, and there was an association that you'd buy games as gifts, but it was really controlled and really measured with the amount that you would interact with that, which is a shame because it's slightly different with my family because my old man introduced me to Doom back on the PC. We used to play that together when I was really small. My mum loved Turok and Quake, and she used to stop me from doing homework to play Halo. So it is a bit different for me, but that's just a global association.
Wait, what? Did you say your mom is the one that enjoyed playing Quake?
Yeah, we completed Halo Original and Legendary together. Yeah, she
What?
yeah.
Gaming family, that's awesome.
Yeah, so for me, like gaming is a bit different, where it didn't have this connotation like some of my peers had, which is like really limited screen time. It was like, you shouldn't really be doing this thing, you should study more. For me, it was like, it was always measured because it's another form of art. It's the same as music, it's the same as watching a film. It's just a video game. It's another means of traveling, um, like an artistic product, but you're delivering in a different means. The only difference between a film and a game really is the fact you're playing through it, right? And there's many different agent options that you have. But I think that that is now coming into commonplace now, where people are recognizing that it is a really expressionate and quite powerful art form. And when you have different IPs interact with each other, especially the more discreet that they are and the more they add to the narrative that you're trying to deliver, that's like the whole premise of the reason why I started the Substack, by the way, that I felt that all the conversations I was having inside of Sony to be like, oh, but that's really interesting. And I really like what we could do with this gaming opportunity here. And I was just like, why am I coming up with all these things that I can't stop thinking about? But it seemed like it wasn't as much of a priority to focus on as a traditional music market. But I totally understand that, because if you look at recent statistics over the past, I would say the past like 6 years, it started as every day you'd be seeing 20 to 30 to 40 to 50,000 tracks being uploaded onto digital service providers every day. And if you competed on like a Friday and you released it, the next day you have another 50,000 tracks. And now today we're talking like 110,000 tracks a day that you're competing for attention with. The volume is just like, it's a completely different world in the music space than it is to gaming. But because games take such a long time to develop, and the projects last for such a long period of time, and there's a lot of activity to keep those capsules, that they have to be treated completely differently in their marketing approach. So why would a music company say, hey, this is something that we're going to focus on bread and butter when it first emerges? Because music industry's been busy.
If you can kind of take a step back, Kenny, you mentioned that you played a lot of music instruments. Did you ever embark on a music career on your own? And yeah, where did that go? And at what point in time of the juncture where you go, okay, you know what? I think it's probably best for me to maybe focus more on the business side of things. If you could share a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's extremely limited, because for me it was more an expressionate thing that I wanted to do. So when I was younger, I was like part of a string ensemble, and then I was like, I was a head trombonist when I was really young for like SAYM down in the Southwest, and then it was more sort of performance based. And I played in a band, like in a few bands across the time, and just like proper went in to learn guitar. And I still consider myself a very good guitarist in the grand scheme of things. Still rusty right now, but as
I'm still struggling with the cage system, by the way. I'm still I'm still like I'm so slow.
Oh no, I think it's one of these things where, for me, like my brain works in a really strange way, where I think some people call it like, oh, I really hate to say it because it seems to be overstimulated, well, overused, but like synesthesia stuff. Like some notes make sense to me, and some like sounds really make sense to me, and that makes it much easier for me to play because I can kind of see what's coming next. But do I know the cage system? Do I know like what note's going to be next? Absolutely not. But I know what feels right. Do you know what I mean? And that's the way that I would compose. And some of the compositional stuff that I've done before would mainly be like sending samples to people that want to use it. But it largely wasn't so much of a commercial affair, because by that point in time, I was starting to study like what are rights and how important are they, and who owns that, and whose responsibility is what to deliver these things.
Really? Okay. At that point, you're already like kind of starting to, I don't know, reverse engineering the right side of things, should you say?
Not when I was like in my sort of maybe late teens, but not in my early teens.
Sure. But you had that kind of epiphany where like, oh, I wonder, like, who does this belong? Like, whose rights is it? And stuff like that. Oh,
and like what impact does that have? And how do these companies like record labels and publishers, how do they make money and how do they go through? And I'm still a student of that today, because the way that I think that everything comes down to the contract, everything comes down to the way that to the way that it's put into the world, and that's actually largely to do with who owns what, really, when you think about it. And that also makes me
I didn't kind of expect for our conversation to like kind of hit the business affairs side so soon. But I guess one of the questions for like people out there who aren't necessarily in the sort of music and gaming world, one of the most common questions is like, should I be licensing a song or should I do a buyout? Like, what would, from your perspective, like, what would be your recommendation? What would be your advice, like, for that question?
Oh well, I saw this great article. It was the guy that had made some music for the Witcher original, and
Right.
he demanded at the time. You're gonna have to Google this because I can't do a Matt Omler and pull out a stat from my head like he can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I remember reading it. And
By the way, we're going to mention Matt Omler all the time.
yeah, do you know what I mean? He's too godlike. Do you know what I mean? And but this article was talking about how this guy that composed a song for The Witcher. What happened was that he asked for a buyout of 9.5k, and he was like, just give me the money because games are never going to do anything. They're not going to be important in culture. This is just going to be a throwaway product. I want my money, right? And now looking back at the whole franchise and what it's made, because he was also offered equity share, so he was either or, the buyout or the equity share. And if he had taken the equity share, I mean, multiple millions he would have had in his pocket, and he's now suing them for 16 million to try and retcon that conversation, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is a big deal because you're kind of going back on the word, and this is the problem that you face when you do things like buyouts, which is if you don't have faith in the long term, then the cost of the sacrifice is that you don't retain equity in the long term. And what I'd say is it depends on two situations: what you think the potential is and what your current financial situation is. Same as investing, the same as understanding what kind of your risk tolerance is. If you really need that money right now, it might be worth you putting in an arrangement, or even if it's something that's scalable. But I'd say that
from the perspective of the artist, right? But I guess there's also the perspective of the game studio, right? On what's like what the pros and cons implication of doing a buyout or licensing instead.
Yeah, it's difficult because a lot of game studios, to my understanding, they would want to buy out because it works better for them. They have full flexibility to do what they want with the music. There's no restrictions to them when the ownership belongs to them.
I would think like if they somehow if they foresee that there will be that future where they want to, like, I don't know, like release a compilation or release a vinyl, and then maybe avoid kind of like, like forever having licensing discussion, I guess a buyout would make sense in that scenario.
If you're a game publisher, you just want to buy out. Do you know what I mean? You want to make sure that you own those rights completely and entirely. You can do what you want with them. And then it means that you don't have any restrictions when it comes to things like content ID, for example, because when you're using a licensed track in there, that's a really big issue when you want content creators to be making content for you. On the other side of things, if you're an artist, I'd say that you want to try and fight for equity. So this is where one of the butting heads of the conversations happens.
Yeah. Because you have to be equity. Could the back end be more like, in like a percentage on, I don't know, whatever, like additional Steam wish lists or something like that, as opposed to
I mean, one way that I think that they should split it is that you have in-game exploitation and then you have musical exploitation. So in-game exploitation would be anything that's derivative of, that's mapping with that visuals as well. That would be making it null, and this is more of a YouTube question than it is a rights holder question because they're the controlling party, or Twitch, for example, that they can control the way that the music is used in the context of the game. But when it's used separate to the context of the game, such as on a streaming product or on a vinyl or on a CD compilation, for example, that it's treated as a musical exploitation. And therefore, that I think that those two should be split and treated slightly differently, because then it gives the publisher full access to do what they want to do with their product, unrestricted. But then it also means that any direct musical exploitation is actually does make sure it directly gives back. At the very least, ideally, as someone that has represented rights for a lot of my career, I would say that all artists should be paid, or any rights holder and therefore artists should be paid for as much of the usage as they possibly can, and that's kind of goes with that question. But how do you get a game to trace how many times one person has gone into a shop to listen to
it? And if I were a game publisher, of course I want to be able to kind of whitelist, certain usage, right? Like, I'm getting this license, but can you whitelist it for me within the UGC ecosystem or whatever, or the gaming ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a tricky one. Yeah, no, but I get what you
Yeah,
mean. Like as an artist, you want to be compensated for whenever like gets used, right? And I think that's where the loggerhead is. Like I
yeah.
think from the artist and record label side, it's all about how do you demarcate like the granular usage. Whereas I think
Mm,
from a game publisher is like, hey, I'm paying this for what would hopefully to kind of whitelist, certain like ecosystem and
yeah.
like UGC, usage. Yeah.
And that's why I think it's a YouTube related question, because in theory there's a trifecta of communication of IP, I suppose, where you've got the game publisher that creates the game, and then you've got the artist itself, or the rights holder, record label publisher, or any other rights that kind of belong to the music itself. But then you've also got the way that it intertwines with culture, which is the third part of the trifecta. I don't know if I'm drawing the right shape here because everything's but the third part is the content creators that want to play the game. Now, all games have this free ability so that you can stream the game without having to give back to the game. They just allow you to do that for free because that free marketing for them is impressively invaluable, right? But then with the music side of things, if you're already listening to the music inside of the game, like how can they? I guess there's two things they want back. One, they want to be paid remuneration. Of course, they would. But secondly, is also how can you convert those fans to be true fans, not just from the game itself, but from the content creators as well, because that's
Yeah,
valuable to artists as well. And I think games deserve to have all of this attention being given to them because it's the platform of which that you can
yeah,
transport that. But then also artists as well. And yeah, you're absolutely right. That is where the loggerhead is, and how I think a lot of it can be done with data, but then the best case scenario is that this is best case scenario is YouTube say, I got an idea. We're going to make sure that Content ID um, only tracks music usages that aren't specific for the in-game streaming usage,
yeah,
which allows licensed music to be able to be used
yeah,
in content creation, which would make game publishers be willing to do it.
yeah. So how we did it at Riot, like XG Undefeated, for example,
Mm.
is that we would have the like animated video, and that's like the licensing, like within the licensing, what you call it, like parameters, if you like, where we have like the CG animated video with their song,
Mm.
but then AVAX tracks would also have like their own version, like the live, let's just call it live action version, and we don't touch any of that, like
Right. Okay. Oh, so you
like
make two versions in parallel. That's interesting.
correct, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or not necessarily in parallel, but whatever like other versions they do outside of that, then
Mm.
we don't include that as part of licensing. Like
Is
the
it the
scope
same
of work is
performer?
really just syncing your song to our animated music video and like a live performance at VCT championships.
Ah, I see. So you're actually having a yeah, I see. Because then you actually are making two different recordings, one of which is obviously different enough, but then they're close enough that you would associate them with different platforms. And I guess from
Yeah.
your perspective, I'd be interested to know what's the priority of trying to channel gaming fans that are fans of the music to the artist. What's the journey and the priority it has been?
Sorry, what's the question there? What's the
So how do you let's say let's say you've got a big artist that has come through. Let's say Journey. I just the first artist that comes to my mind. Journey comes and does two versions for Riot, right? One of
yeah,
which is sort of a live version that I don't know. I guess that would be used in the soundtrack version, which would be on DSPs, and therefore then one specific version is used inside of the game. They're
yeah,
close enough that you can't quite tell, but they're different recordings, so it
yeah.
means that you won't get the conflict with
Oh,
Content
sorry, I
ID.
didn't clarify enough. Like the song's actually the same in the case of XG, but there's like a music video that's like the game animated music video,
Yeah.
and subsequently they did like a dance version and all that. Like we don't touch any of that.
Right. Oh, I see. So
Yeah,
actually, you're saying
yeah,
there is an original track, and then there's different genre derivatives of
yeah, yeah.
that track.
That's right. Yeah,
Wow, that's a great idea. That's great, like domain expansion idea.
yeah, yeah. And I never figure out why, but I think it's through this conversation I'm starting to understand why. I think
Yeah,
you need
I mean,
some sort of different version to just I don't know, like make the accounting make sense or whatever. Like
it's just
so yeah,
recording. All the record label really cares about is the specific recording at hand, because that is the obligation of which that our priority is. How do we make sure that we collect for our artists, that we have a duty to make sure that we're delivering and collecting on their behalf for, because that's what they trust us for. You know, they trust us to look after their rights and deliver them in the best way, in the most suitable way, with them in tow and in mind. You know, it isn't just like this old school industry, you know, it all belongs to us now, goodbye. It's not like that at all. It's more like, how can we best represent that? How can we best detail that? And how can we do that in a way? So if you've got multiple different recordings and you gave one, you know that we would be saying to Content ID, well, if that's going to be used in any prospect, that recording belongs to us. We have an obligation to the artist. How can we make sure we get the most out of that? But I guess what I thought that you were saying was, if you make one specific recording version, because Shazam's all gets tracked on the sound wave anyway. If that goes towards the game, then what happens to all the other derivatives? That is like an expansion of that creative.
We don't.
Works.
We don't.
And if you don't touch those, then it's like
you
can still have those products exist in digital spaces. That's a really interesting way of doing it. I always learn something new from you, mate. Every time we chat, do you know what I mean?
And and I guess that kind of like segues to like, you know, what are some of the, actually, you know what, I want to take a step back, like in terms of your chapter with Sony Music, looking back now, like what do you think is like, what aspects of it like met your expectation, i.e. like the coolness of the industry, or, you know, whatever, and then what were the things that was kind of maybe, you know, not so much kind of like where you thought maybe your expectation of the record company is somewhat different than what you originally hoped for?
I mean, that's a tricky question for me to ask, given underemployment, you know. But what I can say is,
well, are you still okay? Yeah, all right.
I'll phrase this in a way that says,
I guess from a very, very generic and not directed towards any company in particular, you know. For example, let me share maybe I'll share like my perspective. Like for me, like I love all the, you know, like the rock and rollness, you know, meeting the artists and stuff like that. But I think probably what you know, what was sort of not surprising, but then, you know, like a business is a business, right? Like you still need to make money, you know, there are its fair own share of politics, etc. I think those aspects is what kind of caught me off guard when I joined a record company, and like with other companies, I still have to navigate all of that. So there are these kind of pros and cons, you know, from my experience, for sure.
I tell you what, I'll give it in a different perspective here. So there's a number of people that I've been there for like 9 and a bit years, right? So a fair bit of tenure. And I worked at an indie label before, and I've worked with indie labels throughout. So there's a lot of exposure that we have. Being in licensing, you mainly lean on the outside of the company because you're looking with how you interact your rights with other people's either products or rights, and how they can kind of merge in creative and ways that are both beneficial to those third parties and us and the artists. Has always been a thing. So I guess that I never really realized before I went in that there's always the tropes when we look at it and you think, oh, it's a major label. There's sometimes when you just be in the lift. I remember coming out of the lift once, and this is really embarrassing, but I'll say it anyway. I was coming out of the lift once, and I remember I knew that One Direction were in the building back in like 2016, 2017 odd, and I was going out with what looked like to be 2 of their bouncers. Now I used to have a lot blonder hair, and I had a bit more of a quiff, right? And one of the bouncers had a little like 4-leaf clover, and I was like, okay, I reckon it's just one of these like themed bouncers. I went outside, and there was all of these girls screaming, and they thought was it Louis? I can't remember now.
Yeah, Louis.
Right? Not Louis. I can't remember his name. Oh no, there we go. It was Niall. That's it. They thought I was Niall from One Direction. Yeah. And then as soon as they saw because all they saw was like my hair like this and me walking out with the bouncer, I was just leaving. I was just going home. Do you know what I mean? I was just working a late shift. And then as soon as the most disheartening little moment for that, I stepped outside again. All these girls stopped screaming, and one just went, "You're not Niall." And I was just like, I was never trying to be. I was just going home. I was like, I just want to go home. And then I went home, and it was very silent, you know. But so there's obviously there's run into stuff like that which kind of catch you off guard, and that's obviously really nice. But the biggest thing was the fact that there's a lot of care when it comes to making sure that we are looking after artists. And I think that music labels used to have a trope many years ago where it was just like you always hear these things, oh, music labels are really greedy, but it's not like that at all. It's like really quite regimented, and there's a real decent process in place. And yeah, I
right.
really respect
I agree
that.
with
So
you.
I know
Yeah.
almost in a way that took me by surprise a little bit, because I didn't know if I was going to get thrown to the wolves by going in there, but it very much wasn't the case. I think there's always things looking to expand and try to make ways better. And I can't really knock that. But what I'd say is, for anyone going into, there's a lot of interns that come in, and I get put onto the Creative Mentor Network. Shout out to them for quite a bit, and I get given some younger execs to speak to about some of their careers and stuff. And a lot of the time, I always ask the same question, which is like, what do you want? Like, what do you want out of this? And where do you see yourself? And a lot of the time I see A&R marketing sync. Yeah, I understand they're quite fashionable ones, right? But then some of them say, oh, I really want to be like a composer, not a songwriter. And I'm like, it would have been worth them doing a bit of research into knowing that Sony Music as a record company is interested in performers, not so much in songwriters, because you would benefit greatly being a songwriter working at a publishing area where they specifically work with composers. And I'm thinking it would be worth doing a fair bit of research before to say, okay, because the music industry is broad. Like, if I want to get involved with live, a live agency would be great, like some of the bigger ones that exist out there. If I'm really interested in how to deliver products, or maybe some of the royalty infrastructure, maybe that would be the record label side. And obviously you've got A&R2 course, but that has its own academy. Then publishers, composers, you've got sync houses, you've got the tendrils go so deep. And I think that some really good experience that I've spoken to people where they've come out of the internship and they've either stayed, they've really enjoyed it, but the ones that have gone on have now gone on to do things that are really specific for them. And I think that's the most important gift that I can give on to anyone in the music industry, which is it's not all about some of the taglines. There might be a role that's specifically for you, like that has exactly your shape in it. And it's worth detailing what that is to yourself before that you jump into anything, and then saying, is this the one for me? Because I'm sure that at some point in time, I'm really interested in the intersection between music and gaming. I'm sure that there's going to be something that exists in that sort of space for sure. And that would be a really exciting thing to pursue.
Yeah.
And that's for me,
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome perspective. And wow, we're already like 28 minutes in, and we still haven't talked about like recent trends. So let's jump straight to it. Is there, anything that kind of like caught your eye in the music and gaming world recently? That maybe you want to kind of give a quick shout out to. What are some of the sort of like music and gaming sync stuff that you think it's interesting that's happening out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, I could run through one thing that isn't really statistically focused, but something that I'm spotting, which is that a lot of big companies that have a lot of big money seem to be understanding the availability of games as a platform. And by that, I mean Roblox and Fortnite, right? Because you can get third-party developers to build on there, and you can kind of make your own interactive worlds. What I'd say that's really interesting to me is that I think that some of the gaming publishers are using music as an expression rather than an encouragement. And I use those two words quite specifically because I believe it's something called the billboard effect, right? This is something that I just randomly coined a little bit of time ago because it made sense to me. But if you've got an artist that everyone knows about, let's say Elvis Presley, right? Something really big time, and you were to put it on a billboard somewhere, you can pretty much guarantee that all of the people that you know that are going to be walking by and seeing it, whatever metrics you can get, they're probably going to be like, that's Elvis Presley. What's this thing that's going on? But if you put a new artist on a billboard, all you do is raise the credential of that artist to assume that they deserve that status, rather than concerning about the metrics of people being like, who is that artist? I wonder what that's all about. Does it raise curiosity when there's an influx of other things that's going on? And I'm like, no, I don't really know. So what I'm thinking is that some of the bigger brands are now investing in some of these games as a platform, and they're doing it in ways that they're using artists as expressions. So they're saying, if I can afford it, I'm going to get some really big artists to perform as if it's like some sort of corporate artist event. And if I can do that, it means that it wins me credential. And I'm thinking, I get that, but from a music side of things, someone that's worked deeply with music and understand that there's this beautiful tendril between all of people's music tastes and how discovered it on FIFA, discovered it on like SSX, and they've grown it with that taste and how it's evolved. I'm thinking, how can we go about the next step, one step further, and say, how can we encourage music where we create this narrative that runs through games, like games as a platform allows, but instead of just saying, right, I want you to perform this and treating artists like puppets, I would say, how can we find a way that makes genuine fandom encouraged in such a beautiful like a metaverse space? Like, how can we go about that? What shape does that take? I'm not sure, but like,
Are you referring to some sort of kind of like long-term cooperation as opposed to like one-offs?
Yeah, like more of the changing the way that the model works, because there's something that I saw. Was it Ben Seville? I can't remember his name. I saw it on LinkedIn. Who posted that there's this Roblox game that's been created where there's these loads of boats and you can kind of fight all these other boats, but your boat has a giant ad on it. Everyone's boat has a giant
yeah. There's one like Transformers, right? Like it was like advertising.
Oh yeah, it must have been that one, right? That's the thing is, that's so dystopian to me that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I saw it, and I was like, but that to me is like almost. I fear that if Roblox bring in Shopify integration, they start getting experiences that are paid for by big companies that are paywalled. I think that Roblox will be almost replaced by another version that isn't called Roblox, if that makes sense. And people will then go towards this one because there's more authenticity rather than it being created in that way. And I think that all of the Substack I've been writing about is how do you get music to be placed subtly and really beautifully nestled inside of the narrative that a game plays, so that you can cross-pollinate these audiences authentically without it being like, let's use music in this way, or music labels going to game publishers saying, use our music or else. It's like,
Yeah.
I think there's a really beautiful, subtle way to bring these things, whether it's optional, whether it's secret, whether this is earned. And that to me is encouragement. It's how do you encourage music? And I think that if there's anything that I can try and put a flag in the air for, it's like, how can we focus on the encouragement of music rather than just the expression of music? Because you can get a short-term benefit from the expression for sure, but that will come and go. And I think the encouragement of music from the music side of things will has done as much of a fantastic job for music as Ivan at Rockstar or Steven Snur, I believe that's how you say his name, from EA. Icons, right? Absolute icons that have done incredible work in creating those spaces, doing it artistically, but like considerate. I think they're doing it because they're encouraging music discovery. And games are a platform of discovery. I don't think people want to go on there and listen to stuff they've already heard. They want to go on there, listen to stuff they haven't heard and know that's where I heard it before, like first. And they'll always remember that. So games as a platform for discovery, underrated. We just got to get there. And I think we've got to go over this little advertising games as an expression.
Because I think my view is that there's still such a gap, just as all movies and TV have a soundtrack.
Yeah.
Like I think gaming industry deserves to have the same, but somehow we're just not there. We're just not, we're just like you never question, oh, well, why does Titanic have My Heart Will Go On, or like or like Titanic neither My Heart Will Go On. Like no, you don't ask those questions.
Yeah. But that's exactly right. And is it about recreating moments that have already existed? It's like not really. I kind of feel like this is also the same as it comes to A&R today with music, right? It's you've got artists like Billie Eilish, Chappell, Roan, Sabrina Carpenter that have had established careers, but even Chappell Roan's track, like Pink Pony Club was 2022, and then Hot to Go was actually released in 2023. What's making these things pop right now? And I think that what seems to be really important with that is a running theme with all of these artists. Universe are doing a fantastic job with this, by the way, is that they live and die by their values. Even Taylor Swift is associated with that. The Weeknd, they've got these set of values that they say, I'm going to dictate what my journey is. And then almost their operational pass, their labels, their publishers, like, yeah, we believe in that. We're going to follow you. We're going to help you out with that. But then the traditional marketing means, which is labels throwing money at artists to say we're going to make them elevated beyond their means, doesn't seem to be working anymore. Like I think that died out maybe in the noughties. And I think that that's going to come through the games as well. It's like if you've got a true partnership with these two spaces, is going to be one where an artist has declared their values and there's a game that shares those values and they interlink in some way that is actually true to the story. That is like, that's a cheat sheet. Do you know what I mean? That is a cheat sheet right there. And I think that for every artist management or label that might be associated with those conversations, you can sniff them out. You just got to play the game. You got to play a game. It doesn't have to be Roblox and Fortnite. There's so many cool things out there, man. Like, and they all have their own audience.
That really resonated. What like that? I think there's very powerful there, because I think like even what I used to do like at Riot, like we look for that authenticity, like whether whether the artist plays the game or not, can they speak about the game, like I always mention like one of the Asian artists, Amber Liu, was a great ambassador for Valorant because she plays the game herself. She's a gold level player herself. Wow. So she can talk to it, like she can when she hangs out on our game studio, like she can talk to producers about, oh, why did you do that in this map? Why did you do that in that skin, right? But I think you've actually nailed something in the head there. I think in order to kind of have that authenticity, why not go deeper? Why not explore one's artist's value and then compare that with the game's values and see how they intersect. So yeah, no, I really like that. I really how you put it.
No, I think we'll see it. I think there's been some great examples. My favorite example is Red Dead Redemption 2, and the fact that D'Angelo was hanging out in those studios. Very popular story, and he loved it so much that Ivan from Rockstar was just like, "Do you want to do a song for it?" And when I checked out the ownership of that song, it's actually still owned by the record label Columbia in the US. So they obviously worked together to make that happen and to make that inclusion there, which I thought was great. Like what a great collaborative opportunity. And the way they put it in the game was beautiful. Like you have to go through an actual start to finish cinematic ride and it plays the extended version on a loop until you arrive. Like beautiful, perfect, artistic, subtle enough. I heard D'Angelo, I was like, that's D'Angelo. What is going on? Like it took me by surprise. Yeah. And it came from the heart. Like they wanted to do that. And there's loads of opportunities for stuff. I mean, you look at artists now, loads of them. And from all the stuff that I've been speaking to, not just about A&R's sort of inside Sony, but otherwise, there are artists that are coming through that are active gamers. And they're saying, I really want to get involved with A, B, and C game. I hear it everywhere. Like all people are talking about it. So it's not out of the question. I think that there just has to be a bit more confidence with artists being like, I played this game and I really like it. I want to be part of that, and because it wouldn't surprise me if they shared those values initially. If you like it,
but Kenny, I guess one of the feedback that I get is that record labels tend to be like really bad at identifying like what games do their artists play. Like, why is that?
I think that's a question for the people that sit in the room with the artists and have those conversations. But I think that it kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning, which is the music product and the gaming product is so different because music is about, we have to contest with volume. We have to contest with one of the hardest A&R markets that exists right now. But there are creative means of going around. We've seen successes everywhere. Do you know what I mean? You see them all over the place. But how can we manufacture a success journey that's authentic in our world? And at the same time, how do we parallel that with a product that you really need to understand deeply in order to translate that? And it's like, it's very specialist knowledge for sure. But if it's translated correctly, and I would say it's better if it's artist led rather than it's like a rights holder led, they kind of say, I really think this would be a cool thing to do. Then just like the success that we've seen with Chappell, Roan and with Sabrina, Carpenter and Taylor Swift, where they've all said, this is the thing that I believe in. That's where it all starts. So if they're not a gamer, I would say they might as well not touch it. But they might be interested in other things, and that's what they should lean towards. Like people look up to artists because they have an expression, they express their values, and people find common threads with the extreme versions of a part of them that they wish to resonate, but they have an artist do that for them. So how can you get them to reflect that in different spaces where those fans might be that they haven't touched on yet? Like if you have a music inclusion in the game and you find new fans like Exile Vilify for National inside of Portal, a lot of people are saying, well, I discovered the National that way. So does it mean that the National didn't advertise to those fans and that's just something that wasn't in their traditional marketing campaign? So is that suggesting that there's an opportunity with gaming markets in that space? Because do you know what I mean? It's like it's an egg and a chicken situation.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I find interesting. I think like for me, I kind of look at things on like I separate like the big stuff with the not so big stuff, right? So I think like the big stuff is things like okay, like Linkin Park's collaboration with Riot, on the World Championship, which is massive and
Yeah,
awesome in its own right. But what gets me excited though is like the more kind of integrations where there's like not much of an expectation, but then when you see it and you're just like, oh great, like there's now more companies doing it. So for example, I think recently Genshin Impact has got this new character, and then if you look at the trailer, there's like this DJ character, and then there's this song, there's the original song where there's like not only just like EDM beats, but then the artist actually raps all over it. And I think, and then as part of the mystery, you actually don't know who the artist is either. So I think like it's these things that kind of it's a bit like, oh, like are they going to reveal it somehow, or is it? And it just like creates a lot of curiosity on that, right?
Yeah.
And then another example is this New York game studio called Padho Labs, which uh, they're coming out with like it's like an anime action RPG game. And recently they partnered with Sarah Bonito, who's kind of like I don't know, more of a gaming influencer artist type, than an artist type. Is these things are kind of exciting because I feel like those guys don't have we don't have any expectations on them, right? It's not like oh, you're doing Linkin Park now, like how are you gonna beat yourself with the next one? Like for this, it's just like it's just delightful to see them like starting, just starting from somewhere, and then and the only way is to go up, to iterate and improve on it, and that's what gets me exciting, from my perspective.
Oh, I really like that. And the one thing I'd say that concerns me about situations like that is the fact that I wouldn't want any artists and artistic emanations, whether that be through like a virtual artist or otherwise, to be defined and to be trapped inside of a game's context only. Because having a means of being able to transcend beyond the game is just it's almost like it's a room. A game is a room, and there are many rooms. And real life is also a room. And I think that every sort of space that might be digital or physical is just another room. And it's best to see them on the same axis rather than it is in different ones. And if a virtual artist is just existing within inside of that one room, and there's always a risk of being defined by that one room. And artists face the same issue, especially when you're genre locked. Which is a good and a bad thing. It's like you can kind of transcend that if necessary, but you also lose your core fan base. So it's like if you understand your market cap, and let's say like a Genshin 2 comes out, or like a derivative that's owned by the same development publishing company, that would be a really amazing route to move that over. Here's a really, really weird example, right? I've been absolutely obsessed with Satisfactory. Have you played that?
No, I haven't.
It's just like it's a first person factory game, right? My OCD is popping when I'm playing it. I'm like, all the cables are lined up. I'm like automating stuff. But this is the same developer that's done stuff like Goat Simulator and Sanctum. And what they've done is you can buy a boombox you can carry around with you, and it plays different music while you're building stuff, because you can sink hours into that game, right? But they've got soundtracks from the other games that they own as part of their publisher, right? Because Coffee Stain Studios. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to do, because each block, and Riot, obviously you'll know this from Riot Games, their intellectual property game is like second to none. It's just a really beautiful narrative that they're building, and they're creating this IP for these characters, but they're also intertwining music, and they've got the Arcane and Arcane 2 coming out soon, and they've got the games franchise. Like they're building IP like Nintendo did with all of their characters. Like what Sony has with like Astro Bot and Beyond now. They've got Ratchet and Clank, you've got God of War, and like they even Helldivers, all part of the same family. So all of these IP blocks are actually really, really important. And I think that every publisher has the ability to be able to do that. But the next stage is, how do you break beyond that? Do you know what I mean? How do you as an artist that exists in that sort of soundtracking space, especially if you keep your rights and have equity, how do you move beyond that? And that is like a conversation I haven't quite locked onto just yet, because there's going to be examples out there. I just can't pull them out of my head. Where's Matt Omler when you need him? Do you know what I mean?
Well, on that note, maybe we should ever do an episode where it's the three of us. Just
Mate, I'll be keen for that.
Yeah, would you be up for that?
Yeah, I'd be very, very up for that. That would be very good.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Trifecta, you know?
That's right. Listen, Kenny, I didn't expect this to be like 46 minutes, but here we are. Is there anything else that you want to share here before we wrap things up?
I guess I could do a shameless plug. You can reach out to me probably on LinkedIn, even though it's a dry platform. It's just easier to communicate on there, you know. I think it's crazy.
By dry platform?
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, it's not as sexy as like Instagram, or it doesn't have the same interactivity as TikTok.
Okay,
but you know what? I think it's got
businessy. Right,
yeah, do you know what I mean? It's like it can be a little bit well, we don't use it like that, man. We use it in a lot more like, I think people think of it as dry, but you can really make it like a good communicative platform. People respond on there. Communication's really beautiful on there. Underrated, right? So you can catch me in there because I spend most of my time on there. And I also write a Substack called Between Music and Gaming, where I just dish out some ideas that I'm thinking of at the time, or whatever that I think is relevant. There's no rhyme or reason. It's not news associated. It's just things like important collections of notes as I research music and gaming, as I get more proficient in that space.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. But Eric, it's been a pleasure, mate. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to doing this many more times in the future. You know.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would love to keep continue doing this, because we're gonna fight a good fight. And like you said, there's actually not that many of us. I don't know why. Like, you think it's actually quite a big industry, but there's only just a handful of us that really talk about it. So
maybe we're the only ones that are talking to each other. I'm sure there's more underneath some rocks. We can start moving them though, and hopefully stuff like this, you know, opens a conversation to those that are looking for a new home. You know.
That's right. That's right. All right. Thank you, Kenny, and then we'll wrap up the recording from here.
Lovely. Thanks so much.